Hello, and welcome to the South Coast Artists Index, where artists, performers, and writers, as well as curators, directors, and supporters, anyone with ties to the creative community, drops by to introduce themselves to you. We'll talk about their beginnings, their vision, their passion, and so much more. The South Coast Artists Index podcast is brought to you in part by Heavenly Spirits, who invites you to celebrate the art of life and creative communities everywhere.
Hello.
Hello. Can you hear me?
This is Jeff Angeley here with the South Coast Artists Index podcast. South Coast Artists Index podcasts are available anywhere that you stream and listen to podcasts, and also disseminated on social media. And these podcasts are saved for the historical record at the New Bedford Whaling Museum to be used as a reference for what was going on around here and what has going on around here in the past.
Wow.
Here with Sam Babineau.
Hello.
And why don't we do the name thing? So
sure.
Your full name is Samantha.
That's true.
Sam. And how about the spelling of your last name?
Yeah, it's Babineau, Babineau.
Right. Awesome. And so I know Sam from a bunch of different musical areas. Why don't we have you talk about some of what you do? Instruments that you play. Well, actually, you know what? Let's start from the beginning. Where did you get started playing music?
Yeah. So when I was born, my dad really wanted me to learn how to play music, and especially how to read music. And he basically just picked the instrument that he thought was most interesting. And he really liked the sound of the violin. So I have a lot of early memories of just him like going to town on Joy to the World, like on violin. And he was playing classical music. He was learning to read music. And basically his goal was just kind of to expose me to that from an early age. And I remember having like little toy violins and the mini ones. And I think around 7 I started playing in elementary school. We did like there was like a fiddle group, after school group. And so I started that way. We were doing hot cross buns and all those good tunes, and I started taking classical lessons, and then when I was 10 I started doing Irish dance. So I was like introduced to this whole new like music. And like even my first class, I had always come from like a classical background. I did ballet, which is very like structured, and it's very structured. And so when I stopped doing like tap, jazz, and ballet, and I went to an Irish dance class, and it was just like all these kids like leaping around the room, like music bumping, like it was just like a really joyous like encounter with like that culture in music. And I got to jump right in. It was so hands-on. It wasn't like rigid or anything, and I was like, this is what I want to be like engaged with. So that was kind of like my introduction to Irish music, and from there I just continued taking fiddle lessons and playing classical music as well. And I was in the orchestra, the youth orchestra in high school.
What brought you to the Irish dance? Do you have Irish heritage?
I do, but I didn't actually know that at the time. Like I knew that like we had some European heritage on my grandpa's side, but I thought I was like way more Scottish than Irish, and so it actually kind of just worked out that I took like one of the like DNA tests later on, and I was like, oh wow, I'm actually way more Irish than I ever would have thought.
So what put you there in the first place?
I had a friend who did Irish step, and I actually, when I was doing like tap, jazz, and ballet, I had been doing that since I was 3, and I wanted to join a local production of Annie at the Marian Arts Center, and I couldn't do both, and I was like, well, I quit then. I just like, 7-year-old Sam was just like very like making decisions like nothing. Like she had no problem being like, oh, I've only been here for however many years, but I want to try something different. And I really liked dance, and I still do. I do like in school I tried the MIT like swing dance groups and stuff, and like just dance is really a great outlet, I think. But so it was nothing against ballet or anything, but I was like ready to try theater, and it seemed like a cool pairing of just like acting on stage and also singing. So then I wasn't doing dance for a time, and after the production it was like, well, now what do you do? And I had a friend that did Irish step, so I went with her to a class, and that was like the start of it, and
that's a big link to your playing.
I'd say so, yeah.
Did you continue on with classical music after you started the dance, or pretty shortly thereafter kind of lose the classical?
I did classical lessons into maybe junior high or high school. When I was in orchestra, I was still doing classical lessons, but I think I kept up more with the Irish music because that's what I really enjoyed. I felt like reading music was never like a strength of mine, so that was like my dad's main like reason for wanting me to play music, and it still hasn't really come to fruition. I can read here and there, but it's kind of funny, but I like, even with my classical teacher, I used to like beg her to play something before having me sight read it, because then I could just cheat. I could, after hearing her play it, like, plus having the notes, like, I had enough information to like kind of roll with it. But if she made me sight read, it was really hard for me.
Does your dad read? Yeah. He reads well?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fairly, yeah.
And does he plays all classical music, or? He
plays, he has like his old books and stuff. We used to do like the Suzuki books together. Yeah. We'd have competitions like where we would practice together, and whoever could play through, we'd like start at Suzuki book 1, number 1, like Twinkle Twinkle or whatever. Whoever could play through the most without messing up like 1, and so he would start at Twinkle Twinkle and get as far as he could, and then whenever he screwed up, then it was my turn to try, and we'd go back and forth seeing how far. I mean, it was
That's really cool.
Yeah, it was a fun way of getting me to play music, and just like practice a lot, which as a kid I think would have been tough if I was trying to do it on my own. I think even now it's hard, like, you really have to find what you want to learn and what you're excited to play, if you don't want to practice, so.
Yeah. So when you were young and you found traditional music, were you playing those tunes with other people or just your instructor?
Yeah, just my instructor. She had like a group so she would do individual lessons. Nikki Ingstrom was my teacher, and she's down the Cape, and she had a group of all her students that would play together, and we'd go places and play out. But for the most part, I was playing on my own until my dad and I started going to fiddle camps, and that was like a whole new, world. I had never even we went to the camp in Lakefield, Ontario with the Leahys.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and that was like kind of a whole new world too, because I had never been introduced to Cape Breton music before, so there were all the tunes that I knew were Irish, and we didn't match up on a ton of tunes, but
did they play Ottawa Valley tunes there too? Yeah.
I would think so.
Yeah.
So yeah, I didn't know a ton of their tunes, but I was learning them there, and that was the first time I ever went to a jam. And my dad let me stay up till 3 a.m. till it ended, and I was like, this is great. We got up at 8 the next day for breakfast, and it was it was a rough morning, but I thought it was the coolest thing, interacting with all these musicians and playing together was nothing I had ever really experienced on a larger scale that wasn't orchestrated, I guess.
Yeah.
With a fiddle group or an orchestra, you have this agreed upon thing that you're gonna play. So when I got to fiddle camp and we were just what tunes do you know? I was like, oh my gosh, this is really cool.
Yeah.
And it was really communal and just enjoyable. So
did you go to that same camp again, or was it just the one time?
Yeah, I think I went 3 or 4 times.
Wow.
Yeah. But then I ended up, so that one was really far away. So when I came back from camps, it was all right, now you've got a year to practice your stuff and know that in the summer again you can go see those people. But it's kind of once you know that there are those jams happening and stuff, and you've experienced that, it's hard to go back to your music stand and just be now I'm gonna learn this fiddle tune. And I still had those the fiddling group and stuff, but yeah, so I eventually, my mom kind of was hey, I really want you to try this other fiddle camp in Boston Harbor, the Thompson Island camp. And it's a Scottish camp, and I was well, I don't know any Scottish music. But I at first I didn't want to go, and she was it's gonna be really good for you, you should try it. It was one of the first camps I think that I did on my own too, without my dad and without staying. I did, I think, the Mark O'Connor camp, but I stayed home and I just went back and forth, so.
Oh yeah, I'm not familiar with, they're all new to me, all of these camps.
There's, oh my god, there's
no,
tons.
I know there's a lot of them. I've never done anything like that.
Yeah, they're fun.
It's such an interesting thing, and to hear you talk of it, actually, something I'd like to touch on is, it seems like a ton of people who are playing various kinds of traditional music centered around Boston, but all over New England, kind of through those camps when you were younger. So did you keep in touch with people from camp over the course of the year?
Yeah, I well, with the Boston ones, way more than I did with Canadian friends,
right?
Because they were so far away. But yeah, when I went to the Boston camp, it was I think I was in freshman year of high school or something. So I met all these people that were into folk music, and I felt I had finally found a group of kids my age that had similar interests.
Yeah.
So that was like huge for me, and everyone lived fairly close, you know, in Boston or like Arlington or whatever. So I actually got to see them at different parts during the year, and a lot of them went to other camps. So when we learned of the Boston Harbor camp, then it was like Fiddle Hell was next. And I went to Fiddle Hell just expecting it to be another camp, and suddenly like all my friends were there, and I was like, oh my god, so like this is what we do. There's like this summer camp, and then there's like, I don't know, November. So you'd see people throughout the year just kind of naturally going to these like weekend outings where you learn music and jam and whatnot. So
yeah. And the camps, I imagine, are by age level, or
I think they're more by just like ability level. So there's like a beginner class and an intermediate class and advanced class, and kind of just everyone, adults and kids.
Oh yeah. Okay,
went
cool.
all together. And there were other instrument classes too. There was guitar and piano classes, and yeah.
That's one of the most interesting things with traditional music in general, I think, is that it's like not only not uncommon, it's very common to see people who are from like separated by multiple generations playing next to each other. So the Thompson Island camp is not a youth camp, it's anybody who wants to go there camp.
Yeah. I don't think it runs anymore, but there's still like the Pinewoods camp.
That's in Plymouth.
Yeah. I haven't been to that one.
I've not been to that either. I mean, I know so many of them. I mean, I've heard like people who Maine Fiddle Camp is always on the tip of people's tongues. I hear that one mentioned a lot. And then there's Northeast Heritage in Vermont that I hear a lot about. Obviously, Fiddle Hell. I think of that. I don't know if I even think of that as a camp. I don't know what you would describe. What would you describe Fiddle Hell? I've not been.
Yeah.
You know, it's like a million workshops and a million jams.
I guess it's kind of like a conference, maybe.
Yeah.
But basically, you just, it's at a hotel. Like, you literally take over the whole hotel, it seems like. There's like a little bar that people do sessions in, and then for the most part, it's just like, classes are held in different rooms, and sometimes it might be like a hotel room, or it might be like a conference space, or like a function hall that's divided, and there's a bunch of different artists there teaching different kinds of music, and you just go and see what classes pique your interest and go to them,
Yeah, and Fiddle Hell in particular has that, like, it's like a pastiche of, like, 20 different kinds of traditional music available.
Yeah.
Was that true with the Thompson Island? Oh, you said that was Scottish,
yeah,
right?
that was
like, dominantly Scottish.
Like, yeah.
Yeah. Do you find, like, when you're at a Fiddle Hell, do you kind of chase the things that you have the most experience in, or are you, like, there and you're going, like, well, this is the year to pick up, Scandinavian fiddle or whatever it is?
I've taken a few like Scandinavian tunes, but usually it depends. You kind of have to look at like, well, you could go to like beginner Cajun tune, or you could go do like a beginner Irish tune. So like if sometimes they'll list what tunes they want, or if like I have 1,000,001 jigs, so I probably don't want to learn another jig, especially because I feel like they're so easy to pick up. But if I see like a reel that I don't know, I'll go see that. Or they have like harmony workshops that are cool,
like twin fiddle kind of harmony.
Yeah, or even more, so or like arranging. There's all kinds of stuff, but I like to like get in an Irish tune, but as I feel like as long as you're playing, it really it's like with anything, like if you learn a skill, if you learn an instrument, for example, it's going to be easier to pick up your next instrument. So
yeah, I think that's totally true. It's an interesting conversation. I think that is a very much a traditional musician's approach to instruments, though.
Is it?
I don't know. I think that if you were like on a classical path, like if you had stayed on that, like you read, you do exercise 3, and then you do exercise 4, and then you do exercise 5 kind of path, then I think it would feel like when you go to the next instrument, you'd have to start over and do exercise 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh. Whereas like this idea of going to camps where like, okay, so it's traditional music still, but that's the only thing that Scottish music has in common with like the whatever you were playing. Well, possibly in Canada you were playing some like Scottish influenced tunes or whatever. Yeah. But like a lot of times you'd have a completely different body of tunes.
Sure.
But there's no thought to it because it's just you just pick them up by ear anyway. And once you've done that at a couple camps, you go like, well, I could ear that out.
Yeah,
you know?
Totally.
It's kind of what you do with another instrument, right? Is you just put your ears on that instrument once you figure out what buttons to press.
I mean, it's a little harder to pick up maybe the nuances of like, you know, different techniques that are,
right,
you know, more like you've got like the Scottish strathspeys and like the like ducka, those like quick notes aren't going to be present in like other kinds of music, or you know, the rolls and things like. But even if I learn a Scandinavian tune or like the slangs polska, or like I'm gonna play it with like Scottish or Irish ornaments,
right,
and it's gonna sound like it has an Irish accent, kind of. It doesn't have to, but that's just kind of naturally how I play. And if I wanted to make it authentic, I'd have to like not do those things.
It'd take a lot of time. Yeah, those things. I'm the same way. Like I can't, if I play Irish tunes, if I get together with people who are playing Irish tunes, I just turn them all into old time tunes. You know, like I mean, I can play the tunes. It's just it sounds like somebody showed up. You know, like I imagine it being like a conversation between people who have like an Irish brogue, and I come in and like it's just like I sound like something out of like a cowboy movie or something like that. You know?
I feel like that's how I feel like I'll learn your old time tunes, and I did that. It's kind of funny too how we ended up playing together, but like my mom entered me in a raffle for one of the old time classes, and I think that was like one of the best raffles I won, because so I did your old time class, and like how you broke down like the bow and everything, like that was really helpful for understanding what old time sound is like made of. But even now when you teach me old time tunes, I'm gonna play it like a little bit Irish, but what can you do? I
think old time tunes, you could correct me if you see this differently. I've been trying to figure out what Irish music is for most of my life, and I still don't think I know. Old time tunes make sense to me because I feel like they don't even really exist. Like there's this kind of like nebulous idea that is the tune, but like there's a whole range of possible melodies that fit within what's possibly the old time tune. Like my version of Julianne Johnson and your version of Julianne Johnson might be wildly different, but they somehow fit together because old time music is built in this way that you can strip it down to the absolute foundation and build it back up in a million different ways. And I think I've come to the conclusion that, well, one of two things are definitely true. Irish music either just isn't that way, or I don't get it. But I mean, I think I kind of maybe decided not that long ago that maybe Irish music isn't meant to be stripped down. That like all of those notes that are there are the thing. It's more like a Baroque painting where you see a million little details in the painting, and that is what the painting is. And if you take them out, it's no longer a Baroque painting.
Huh. That's interesting, because I agree with like how you think of old time, like, and this is from someone who doesn't have as much experience with old time music, but you know, old time, you're way more likely to just like sit in a tune for like 10 rounds if you
Yeah.
want, you know.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
just like meditative almost.
Yeah.
And so naturally those variations are going to come through. And I think, you know, when you have the open tunings too, there's like different possibilities of like reworking things. And I think with Irish tunes, it's like there's still variations, and sometimes there's variations written into the tune, but it's like, I don't know, it's more of like a game of telephone. Like you might learn it differently from someone, and then you teach it and it's a little bit different, but it's like mostly the same.
Mm-hmm.
Or like there's a change in a note here or there, but it's not like completely the melody's gonna be different, you know, or it's a different tune.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no. Yeah, I agree. You know, this is another like traditional music concept, since we're talking traditional music and both being traditional musicians around here.
Mm-hmm.
I find like the culture in old time music and the culture in Irish music really, really different, and I wonder how much of that is true, more true or less true at camps. One of the things that I find true in old time circles is like, it's totally acceptable because the tune goes around 10, 12 times sometimes, you know, to kind of very quietly be like figuring something out. And then when you've got it, you lean in, you know?
Yeah.
And so a lot of times in an old time circle, a tune might start out with like 1 or 2 people playing it, and by the time it's done, there are 15 people playing.
Yeah.
Whereas in Irish music, I always got the impression, like if I didn't know it, I was expected to put the instrument on my lap, you know? And I don't know if that's true everywhere, you know, but do you find that to be true? And if so, do you find it to be less true at like camps and stuff like that?
Yeah. I definitely have seen like that from Irish players, like at jams that I've gone to, just like, oh, if I don't know this, I'm just gonna let you play it. Or, you know, but maybe I never picked up on like that cue or whatnot, but I was always just like, well, I'm gonna like comp or something, like I can play the chords at least, maybe. Play something that sounds cool. It doesn't have to be the tune per se, but I was always trying to like figure it out as it came around. I didn't, you know, because it almost felt to me like, I don't know this tune, so I guess I'm just gonna sit back and listen. Like that's totally fine, like if that's what you want to do at any jam. I think it's like,
for sure.
But I always wanted to try to figure it out. So I'm sure that is kind of a thing, but I just never really adhered to it. But you know.
Do you find etiquette at camps and festivals and stuff like that is different than like the etiquette at like I don't know, I don't really go to Irish jams at restaurants or bars or anything like that anymore, but that kind of thing where there's like a core of people sitting down on a Thursday night every Thursday at the same place kind of thing?
I'd say so. It's pretty different. I think at like camp jams, people are going to be playing camp tunes. They're going to be like, there's a way more like comping and backing people. Or like there's more instruments, I think, just in general. Like people might have tin whistles and like cellos, and you're not really going to see a cello typically at an Irish jam.
Right.
But we would even like at camps, you know, like the old time covers of like, or bluegrass covers of like pop songs and stuff. That was just something that kind of like naturally came about like at camps. It's like, oh well, we all listen to like this alternative folk musician, so let's play their songs. Or like I've had multiple experiences where friends of mine have been like, oh, you listen to this album and I listen to this album, let's just play as much of it as we can, even if it's like super hard. There's a lot of like time for teaching tunes and like just jamming on them. So yeah, I would say that the vibe is definitely different.
Sounds like a really open
Yeah.
culture. It's interesting because I think that like traditional musics in general, they can either be really wide open or they can get completely closed down. And one of the things that I always loved about old time music was that it was really open. But when I lived in Asheville, North Carolina, it was not. There were like people who had a really distinct sense of like, oh no, you up-picked on the guitar in this section, that's like wrong,
Yeah.
And I found like with Irish music at like the restaurant pub style kind of jams here, that there's a lot of that like kind of policing what's trad, But when I was in Ireland, like in little tiny towns, like it was not weird at all to have people like absolutely like wonderful musicians play through a fiddle tune and then have an old man like just like completely a cappella break out like You Were Always on My Mind by Willie Nelson in between or something like that. Something like that was just like not what anybody who was like policing the traditionalists think would be happening.
Yeah.
It was very much the real tradition and,
Right.
someplace in the middle of Cork,
Yeah. It's kind of interesting to think about that because it's like when you think about like authenticity, right, of like recreating or reconstructing a tradition like here or carrying on a tradition in America, we're not obviously in Irish culture in Ireland. So we're like trying to make it as authentic as you could, but that is by playing tunes, and like maybe people interpret that as like playing things the right way or doing like what is traditional. But if you went to Ireland and had that experience, you'd see maybe that it's more about like the idea behind it was like just that everyone got together and played music.
Yeah.
It doesn't really matter, so much what you're playing.
Yeah, and I think even within Ireland, I mean, some of the things that I've seen is that there are places that are known for traditional music, and you probably find the people there who are like, it is this way, And there are other places that are absolutely making traditional music on a regular basis, but they're not like a destination to hear traditional music.
Yeah.
Like there are towns that like people go to because like this is the town where they play traditional music, and then there are other towns that's just like there's a session on every Friday.
Yeah.
Always has been. It's just as traditional as the other ones, except nobody's enforcing the rules.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really interesting. So comping, you said talking about comping for tunes, which is a thing that I've quite literally never done. I guess the closest thing to that I've ever done is like playing mandolin style chops on a fiddle to back up like bluegrass kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But you were saying that like at camps there were a lot of people kind of comping chords for each other on fiddles and stuff like that.
Yep.
And that was fairly common.
Yeah, like super common.
Wow.
It's like even taught, like if you're learning a tune, you'll often like go through the chords or chord options.
Yeah.
Like and learn them like with the tune, and then like you might split into two parts, and one will comp for the other half that's just learned the tune and then switch.
I've
kind of
never heard a fiddle player comp chords for an Irish tune before, except for like, well, I guess the closest thing to that I can think of is hearing you play tunes and then comp chords that are the chord progression of the tune and singing over them.
Yeah.
But I've never heard that in any other context.
Huh. I mean, I haven't been to an Irish session in a while. I think like COVID really put a damper on that kind of thing. And so that's kind of like one of the things that I want to do this year is like go back to a camp, because it's really been so long since I've been with like a bigger group of people, like for an extended period of time, just like learning music. But yeah, I feel like it's just kind of like, if you don't know the tune, it's something to do. It's a way to participate, and maybe I'm not like a great person to back you, but like you can play 2 notes on the fiddle at once, even if you're just like strumming the fiddle like a guitar or ukulele. You know, you can do a little something that's not just like sitting there and watching. But and sometimes it's nice to do that. But especially if I'm like, oh, this is a tune that is familiar to me, or I remember this, that I would try to figure out the chords and maybe record it and figure it out later, you know?
Did they teach you rhythms when you were doing that too? Like kind of comp rhythms, or just kind of these are the chords?
Just kind of like
find something.
Basic chop stuff.
Yeah.
Like, and for, I don't know, people who are like, what is a chop? That's like, kind of like on a fiddle, if you're, instead of playing it how you normally would, just throwing your bow at like the bridge area and getting like a really scrapey sound. You'll hear it in like some old-timey or like country bands, like as like a rhythm kind of, but I don't feel like I've ever learned specific rhythms to comp. I actually
you play some pretty complex rhythms. Your comp has pretty complex rhythms. I mean, I think of like, to me, like chops as being like beat 2, beat 4, you know, hit it hard, make it short. That's like all of the chopping that ever happens in bluegrass is 2 and 4. And then the first time I ever heard anybody do anything more complex than that was like Casey Dreisen, guys like back in like,
oh my god,
2000, who were starting to do stuff that it was like scratching and popping. I think Daryl Anger does some of that stuff too, but like these kind of like scratchy, poppy, clicky, where you could get funky sounds. Casey Dreisen can make it sound like a turntable.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
You've seen the video of him on a gondola, right?
No.
He's playing is it like house carpenter or something? It's incredible. The like rhythms that he can accomplish on a fiddle is like, and also play chords, like it's, and sing, like there's a lot going on, and playing in the middle. But yeah, I'd say that like for me, I started learning like different options for like chopping rhythms when I was doing lessons with Emerald Ray for a little bit. And we were kind of working on like just writing and how to back yourself on violin.
For vocal.
Yeah. And also just like weirdly what would help, I think, is like if you're learning like ukulele or guitar, those like strumming patterns of like down, up, they don't like immediately translate, but you can like that pattern and the things that you're trying to emphasize, I think translates.
Yeah, if you say so. I think that what you do is like that right hand rhythm stuff on the fiddle, like the comping rhythm stuff, is really impressive. I can strum all day long on a guitar or ukulele, but I cannot make those kind of rhythms happen. I mean, I imagine if I put the hours in that I could find that, but if I try to do it now, it's totally gauche. Like I can get that chop on 2 and 4, and I can probably get like a little bit of something else in, but as soon as I think about getting rhythmic, I've got to drop the bow on the strings and start going back and forth. Like the up and down of it, I think, is like a whole other element. And in the pop, that kind of like, it seems like sometimes there's just like literally a bow drop where there's no note at all, just kind of a clicking sound from dropping the bow. I have no idea. I can put my bow down, it doesn't click. I don't know how that
like
happens.
kind of like I think that click or like that rest is kind of the same as like if you were strumming and you had like a ghost, like, you know, if you want to hit all the up, but you don't want to play down, up the whole time, you know? Yeah, I think another way too that you could learn that kind of thing is like I remember trying to figure out how I was going to play Man-Eater on the fiddle, and I was like playing just like a regular chop that wasn't complex at all, and like singing over the chords and being like, this doesn't sound like Man-Eater, because so much of that song is like that like doom 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 like at the beginning, like the bass. And I was like, how do I make it translate? And like, because that's so much of the song, like you can't play Maneater without like that rhythm,
right?
And like, because otherwise it just sounds weird.
My sister had when we were kids, my sister had a room, and I had to walk through her room to get downstairs, and everything was downstairs. Like, we had the upstairs, but there was like not a kitchen up there or anything like that, so I had to walk through her room, and she had this little record player. It was like, I don't know what it was, but something from like 1985 or something like that, but it only played, what are they, 33s, the little ones? They were all singles. They were like these records, they're like the size of like a large grapefruit, and they had like one song on each side. There'd be like the single and the B-side.
Right.
And she had Maneater, and she played it like 11 million times. I remember being a major source of conflict. Like trapped upstairs with like Maneater on all the time for like weeks at a time.
That's hilarious. You must know that song really well.
I do know that song really well.
That would be like a great place to start your chopping journey, is to learn Maneater.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. So, segue. Mm-hmm. So you learn how to comp mostly from playing traditional music and backing things?
I mean, I would say more from learning to accompany myself. Because I remember those classes where, someone would teach a tune and then teach the chords. And I had not a lot of chord knowledge as, like, a fiddle player. Mm-hmm. And that was really tough for me, so I, like, struggled to keep up with that part. And, like, the cellos, like, really killed it. They were always, like, backing people up, and I was, like, happy to play the tune,
Yeah.
So that, like, kind of chordal knowledge and, like, comping knowledge didn't really come until later when I was, like, when I started writing, I was, like, playing on ukulele, and I was like, I don't really want to only ever play ukulele when I'm a fiddle player, so I started, like, transferring all the songs that I had written on ukulele onto fiddle. And so eventually it, like, built up to a point where I was like, oh, I could actually, like, this is sustainable,
Yeah.
But I think it more came from, like, that practice and, like, trying to find out what works when you're singing. And not so much from, like, learning trad tunes. It was very present, but I personally didn't learn it that way. Like, I really had to, like, zero in on that aspect alone to, like, learn it. I couldn't, like, learn a tune and then also learn the chords and then, like, play the backing,
So alongside your traditional playing, at some point you started writing songs. Mm-hmm. And when was the songwriting stuff kind of starting up for you?
I was like 19, so not till college, really.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Pretty late.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I say pretty late. I didn't, like, play string instruments until I was in my late teens, so pretty late in your musical journey.
Yeah.
You had been playing trad for a long time before you were writing.
Mm-hmm.
And were you singing before you were writing?
I mean, I was singing the whole way through, I'd say. Like, I was, since, like, fourth grade, I was in chorus, like, all through high school.
Okay, so there's chorus and stuff like that involved. Any singing in less formal settings before you started writing? Like singing with other people, singing with bands, like even just like family singing or stuff at the camps or anything like that were singing?
Not so much with family. I sang with Grace for a few years, and there wasn't, other than that, there wasn't a ton that I was saying. Oh, you know what? I did do showstoppers.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I don't know how old I was, but for like a year or two, maybe.
Who is it in charge of the showstopper thing?
Kelly Zuko.
Oh, yeah, I don't think I know her.
Yeah.
It's just like a couple of those. There's another vocal group, at least one other vocal group around here that does this similar
Yeah,
kind
there
of
is
thing.
another one. I can't remember.
But I know her. there's a woman who runs one of them named Sharon Jensen.
Okay.
And I know Sharon because she used to be the activities director at a nursing home that I played music at. How was that experience?
The Showstoppers?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was cool.
Seems like people who do it really like it.
Yeah. I mean, we got to sing in cool places, and it was like getting me up in front of people, I think was like that's the only way. Like if you have stage fright or something, like the only way you're ever gonna like get over that is by just like constantly being in front of people. Even like I can feel like the difference if I like play a show and then go like however many months and then play another show. It's like, wow, I haven't been in front of like an audience for a long time. Like you can feel that difference. And I think being in Showstoppers was really cool for like, learning how to be in front of people, even in a group. And, it was a long time after that I was like then singing in front of people again. And like, other than like chorus. But yeah, that I did that as a kid, did chorus. And
it's such a different world, right? Between traditional music where you're like, it's really informal. There's not really a stage. Sometimes there's people watching, but it's not, like, if they're there and they enjoy it as a show, good for them. But like, that's not why you're doing it, right?
Yeah.
But then like being up on a stage performing is really, really different. You said it took a while or sometimes takes some acclimating. Was it something that you wanted, or is it something that you see as like in between you and something else that you want?
I remember feeling like when I first started playing songs for like family and stuff, I felt like that kind of, the way a room reacts to a song was like so cool. And I was like, I want to chase that. Like, it's just a really cool, like, intimate experience that you can have with a group of people. And, even at camps and stuff, we were always, like, singing songs to each other, teaching each other songs. And, if, we loved Hosier, we would sing Hosier all the time. And, like, if we both knew a song, like, someone would play the chords and we'd sing it through or whatever. So, like, singing is very much, like, a part of those like groups and camps and stuff. But yeah, I would say that like I always enjoyed being on stage like at a young age. And I think when I was younger it was just kind of like, like why not do this? Like, when you're 5 you have no like self-awareness. And you can kind of just do anything if that's like, I wasn't a shy kid, so I was just like, put me on stage, I'll do whatever, and I enjoyed it. I don't think it was like something I was at that time like, oh, I need to do this, but I liked it and it was fun to perform. Later on when I started writing music, like I liked singing songs for people and I liked playing in a band. And I like singing for people now. But I think really like one of those key moments was playing for like family in Oregon and just like being like, this is something that I made and I'm going to play it for all you, you know? And just like how people listen and react. And it's just like, it's like really magical in that moment. It's like a little time capsule, and I really enjoyed that feeling. So I don't know. I don't know if it's like the performing aspect so much as like
it
wanting to write.
At least part of it for you that you enjoy the performing. It's interesting because as musicians, there's a million different ways that people get into making music, or a million different reasons why people create music. And I've known people who their performance is everything. I mean, I've totally known people who are like mousy, quiet people who go on stage and they're like possessed by like a demon. It's just like the place where they can let all of that out, but I also know other people, and I think I kind of consider myself in this camp. I've come around some, but I never really wanted to perform. I wanted to write songs. I wanted people to hear my songs, and the performance was an unfortunate reality that I had to deal with in order to bring the things that I wrote to people.
Yeah.
I have definitely always at times enjoyed performances, but I more enjoy the process of building the thing. But there's like a spectrum there, right? I think that,
yeah, totally.
like, there are people who the performance is why you write the song, and there's the people, the performance is just there to get the song to people, and then probably folks who are somewhere in between. They like some of the aspects of each of them.
I guess I'm in the in-between camp, because, like, I don't see myself being at this point in, like, writing. So I've been writing for what, like 5 years? 24? Yeah, so I didn't really see myself now, like, writing songs for other people. Like, collaboratively, maybe, like, that sounds fun to me, and we've done some of that with, like, Pebbles, and, like, that has been really enjoyable. Like, the aspect of creating I like, but I don't think I would really at this point, like, want to write a song for someone else to sing. Like, I think it would be fun, maybe, but I know that's some people like to do that. They're just like, I want to write songs and that's all I want to do, but I don't want to sing them ever.
Yeah,
you know?
For sure.
So I like singing my songs, and but I also think, like, the creative aspect of, like, if I don't, like, create something for a long enough time, like, I get sad about it. I'm like, I feel like kind of compelled to do it in a sense, like, and it doesn't always have to be music, it could really be anything, but just something to, like, have that outlet, I think is important for me, and songs are, like, kind of the ones that I enjoy most, so.
Yeah, I think creating music, and I say this, I'm not a visual artist at all. Once upon a time, when I was young, I thought about going to school for visual arts, and then I got bit by the bug, and music has owned me ever since. But there's something different about songs because they exist in real time.
Yeah.
And I think that, there's, like, another conversation there, like, where, some people write songs for other people. Some people write songs, like, I know a contingent of people who write songs, make albums, and basically never support them at all. They just make records and then put them out there,
Yeah.
But there is something, like, I really do believe, like, I like making records, but there's something about real-time performance of music that, like, ephemeral, like, it just happened for 3.5 minutes. Like, you were there in that moment or you weren't. In the same way that, like, like, if you go someplace, you see, like, an amazing sunset over the mountains, like, the photograph of it is not the thing. It's like, totally. It's that moment,
Yeah.
You do a lot of solo performances. Did you start with solo performing?
No, not really.
Do you like solo performing?
Yeah, I do. I enjoy, just playing for people, and I think for a time I was like, it was the most sustainable thing, like, finding people to play with, and then, like, teaching them your songs, or, like, finding out what you collectively want to do is, like, really an endeavor,
No, it's hard, and
so
it's easy to lose too. You put a lot of time and work into something, and then it's just it can be gone like that.
So I absolutely love playing with people. I think for me it was just like, well, if I want to play music and I want to write songs, like, I'm just gonna have to figure out a way to do it, on my own, so that it's, I can do it.
Yeah, I can't do it.
You could.
I have.
You have.
But, like, I book solo performances once in a while, and then I show up with, like, 5 people by the time I get to it. I'm like, oh, you got this one. You can join me on that. The only time it's happened in recent years is I took a gig just like that, where I was like, well, I'll just find somebody to play it with me. And then it was during COVID, and the person who booked me was like, no, it's just you. I was just like, maybe like one other person. They were like, no, it's just you.
Yeah.
They're just like, oh, I guess I'm doing this then.
Yeah.
I find that so, like, it's interesting because talking about nerves on stage, or like just acclimating to be on stage, I don't know how you feel about this, and that's going to be the question, but I feel very, very different when I have people to be on stage with than when I'm on my own. I feel like when I'm on stage with other people, even if things aren't going right, like, there are other people sharing that experience, and we're like there together. Sure. And as long as we're cool to each other, we can be like, hey, you know, remember that time that thing happened? Like, instead of it just being like something you just like own. You know?
Yeah. I think it's like a weird feeling for me, because I think when you're this kind of, so I used to do like group, I did Kaylee dancing. So like 4 hands, 8 hands, and that's just 4 people or 8 people. Sometimes 2 hands. And that always like, yes, you can share it with someone, but it made me more nervous in a way, because you're like, you have to do well for the other people in your group.
Oh, yeah.
And like, so that, I feel like there's different pressures. I don't think one is, for me, better than the other, because I enjoy playing on my own and playing as a group. And I think, in general, I'm less nervous to play in a group. But I think when you're playing solo, you know 100%, like, this is how it's maybe gonna go. Like, I'm gonna talk about this thing, these songs.
Yeah.
Like, you can kind of craft it more, or like alter it at a moment's notice, where like with a group it's like, okay, what's the play here? You kind of have to read everyone,
right.
Which is like, can be harder. Not necessarily, because I think like with our group, it's like things happen pretty seamlessly.
It's pretty rare, though, I would say.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like most of the time, there is a thing in groups. There's like, there can be a tension with like what people want, or more particularly what people need if things aren't going well. Like, some people need to freak out. You know? Some people need to move on from that spot. Some people need to bear through it, and that can be tough. I think that kind of communication definitely adds a layer of complexity to performance.
Yeah. I actually, so like the sweet spot, honestly, I've only played one show in the round before, but my friend Rachel Marie invited me up to a show in Cambridge, at the Armory, and that was like so cool. Is it in Cambridge? I feel like it's not in Cambridge. I can't remember. It's somewhere in Boston.
Greater Boston area.
And
it's Somerville, isn't it?
Yes.
Somerville,
it's the Somerville Armory. And that was just really cool, because like, you're still performing solo, and you're still always talking about your own songs and stuff, but you have like 2 other people to bounce off of. And that was like a completely new experience for me that I really enjoyed. I was like, oh, like, I can kind of like match them where they're at, like how they're interacting with the audience, where I feel like when you're solo, it's just kind of like you're looking for that vibe, and sometimes it's harder to find. But when there's other people on stage with you, interacting with the audience, you can talk to them, you can talk to the audience. Like, it just made it a little easier and like looser, I think. Not so like, I think as a solo performer, I can get like a little bit like, oh, this is what I'm gonna talk about, a little bit too rigid. And like, playing with other people, it was like, oh, this is like a show that we're just performing, like, we're here to make people laugh and have a good time and like engage with music. So that was like a really cool experience, and I liked that format a lot.
All right, so we talked traditional music, we talked songwriting. We are coming up on time. You're also teaching.
Yeah.
Teach instrumental and vocal music, and you have a group class coming up. Why don't we do a quick talk on that, and then shortly thereafter, we're gonna wrap up with like
Sure.
What's on the horizon for you and that kind
Totally.
of thing. So, so how about teaching?
Yeah,
You're teaching.
Teaching has been a really, just like, I'm really grateful for it. You know, like, I think when I was younger and like kind of on, whenever like these major life changes would happen, like when you're younger, like graduating high school or going to college or graduating college and working, and like I was always so afraid that I was not going to do music. Like that was a huge fear of mine. I was like, well, what if I go to college and I'm like, you know, learning to be a speech pathologist and I never do music again? Like that was a huge fear of mine, and it never happened because, I mean, I guess it makes sense, because if that was the thing that I was most afraid of, like I made it a point to keep music in my life, but it wasn't, I didn't have to work as hard for it as I thought I was going to. Like it was more naturally occurring. And teaching was definitely a part of that. Like teaching at Hatch Street was, I guess, the first time that I was like, I had students. And so I thought, I mean, it's a great experience. I teach now too at school, and like I don't teach music, I teach speech, but it's still like, I really enjoy teaching just as a whole. And, you know, finding ways that things make sense to different people is like part of the fun of it. And seeing people succeed. I don't know if you feel this way, but like I was talking to my stepdad, and he was like, we were talking about the little victories that you see people, and how, you know, to someone listening in, you know, a fiddle student playing the same song like out of tune might not mean anything to them, but to me, like seeing a student like take a breath and like think about their next note, where yesterday they would have like rushed through it or something, like that's huge. That's like amazing progress. And like I get excited about those little things that make up over time like progress, and I think it's really cool to see that in someone else. So yeah, I've been doing a lot of like just one-on-one lessons, but I'm really excited to try group lessons for the group singing class at the Heron in Westport. This is kind of like, even since like I was in chorus, like or at Hatch Street, like it was kind of something that I wanted to try, and I'm excited to just have a space where people can come together and like sing together in a place that's like, it's not judgment, like everyone's trying to learn how to sing, and you don't have to be like a singer to like engage with music or like be in a group together singing. So yeah, I think just teaching is really fun, and I like doing it in lots of contexts, so doing it with music makes sense.
And it's great to have it where you have teaching informing other teaching, right? Where you have the speech kind of more traditional, well, not traditional, but classroom kind of setting, teaching, informing, kind of something that's a more independent music teaching situation. Okay, so it is about that time. I could ask you a million more questions, but we've been talking for like an hour. And what do you have on the horizon? You were mentioning the Heron thing. Like, okay, so this is like a huge, you get to decide what you talk about.
Totally, yeah.
But like, what do you want people to find that you're doing, and what do you have coming up? So that could be like classes or recordings or shows, or I mean specific shows. The podcast probably not going to come out like tomorrow, so if it's like a show for next week,
for sure,
but just like a general idea.
I mean, I usually play at Ansel Cafe. I love that place.
That's
it's so
Rochester.
cozy. It's kind of Marion.
Marion?
It's at the Ansel Gurney house. And I love that place, and I play there probably like once a month, but like if you follow me, you'll see it pop up. And I'm doing the class that's coming up. I really want to get some like longer videos up this year, and I'm looking at recording this year is like one thing that I really want to tackle, you know? So that's kind of like the things that are on the horizon. There's like not a ton that's like super in stone yet, but it's being worked on for sure. I've got a lot of music that I haven't recorded, and I want to like get that out to the world and just have it documented, you know, in a sense. So yeah, I think that's what my year is gonna look like, is
that's a lot.
Gigs here and there, and
new teaching stuff, gigs, and new recordings. That's plenty. Plus working, teaching as a job.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
And whatever we record with Pebbles of Rain, and you know, like, I think this is gonna be a big year for recording, honestly. But I'm really trying to, like, you know, get away from the idea of like, you know, I used to just be so like bored as a kid, and I could sit in that for like a long time, and that boredom would turn into like creating something or making games, and that I want to get back to that and like spend that time writing, you know?
Lost art, boredom.
Yeah, I know. It really
it's
like
crazy.
It doesn't exist anymore.
It's hard to find boredom.
Yeah.
I mean, I have kids, so I have kids and a mortgage, so boredom is a luxury that I couldn't afford most of the time anyway. But even without that, the world doesn't give us as much opportunity to be bored. And I jokingly say the lost art of boredom, but there is something to it. That is like kind of like the seed of creativity a lot of times.
I think we just like fill that space so quickly with things that like really don't serve me, at least, you know, like
that Bo Burnham song. Do you know that song? A little bit of everything all the time.
Yes. Yeah. It's like I can waste so much time that I just want to be more mindful about if I'm bored.
Yeah, it's hard.
Right. I'm not filling it with something that doesn't serve me. Just like go for writing a song or recording or like anything, you know?
Yeah. And it's kind of like what we bring to people too, right? I mean, like the arts in general, visual art, music, theater, it's like you're asking people to live intentionally for short blasts of time to take in what you did. Sure. You know what I mean? To take in what you did when you were living intentionally, you know?
It's funny.
It's like, it's tough. It's kind of jeopardized in every direction from, it's, you know, once upon a time by culture, you know, we live in a business-driven, fast-moving culture, but now also just by, there's not a place on the globe where you're not inundated with the virtual digital temptation. So
totally.
All right. Well, I've been talking with Sam Babineau. Thank you for hanging out.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, super fun. And that is it for this edition of the South Coast Artist Index podcast.
We'll see you next week for another episode of the South Coast Artist Index podcast. To learn more about the South Coast Artist Index, visit theartistindex.com. Find us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube.